Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and we're here to discuss the offense from that Bills game on Sunday Night Football. Pleasant discussion. Got one of my good friends, Jason Smith from Huddle It Up Films. Jason, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, Ken. Good week to be on. 35 points, big win for the Ravens.
Yeah, it was the one of the big things about Buffalo, and a Buffalo fan told me, and he spent the entire game basically yelling at the field. You ever get this feeling you're in this position with somebody else? But what he's really doing is trying to have an argument with me that I never responded to. But I'm sure you've had that kind of fan behind you. And at the end of the game, he kind of shook my hand, said, "Good game." And I hadn't spoken a word to him the entire game. And but that was nice anyway. And then he said, that's the first game the Bills have lost by more than 6 points in 3 years. And I looked it up, and it's 11-21-21, almost 3 years ago, that they last lost a game by more than 6 points. So this is a not insignificant shellacking they put on a pretty damn good football team.
I want to say the number is 43 games.
43 games. Makes
because
sense.
I've heard that they did. Apparently, this was a thing that was mentioned on different, maybe ESPN or sometimes when we win, I like to cherry pick and watch the shows that I think are not very good most of the time. But I just want to hear what the narratives, how they changed. And I heard that I think it was 40 some for sure.
Yeah, but 43 kind of makes sense because if you figure it's 17 times 3 is 3 years would be 51. They may or may not be talking about the postseason. I really don't know. But let's say it's 51 during the regular season. And then we're about 6 weeks short of that point, which might make it 45 or whatever. But it's right in that neighborhood.
Okay. Yeah. Either way, really convincing win. I think for the Bills, it probably shook them up a little bit just in the manner in which we ran over them, out-physicaled them. The problems that they have, the absences, the injuries at linebacker and safety that they've suffered. And, the Ravens really exposed them in this game.
It's definitely a kind of a come to Jesus meeting for them in terms of the quality of their defensive line. And they I don't know when Matt Milano is back, if he's even planning to come back this year, if he's still on IR with a DTR designation, or that he's lost for the year. But he is a very significant loss as a coverage asset and also as a run defender. And then they've moved on from Hyde and Poyer, and they have different guys at safety right now who are not the same kind of quality. It's definitely it's a football team that looked a lot better playing some not particularly good teams the first 3 weeks than they really were, and I think it's probably an unfortunate reality for Bills fans.
It really is, and they have a one-man show at quarterback themselves, which is good for them. It's going to keep them in it. They're probably going to win the division. Their division doesn't look very strong, but as strong as I thought it would be before the season, that's for sure. I thought the Jets would be a little better than they are. I thought Miami would be a little better than they are. So, but in the end, that's something they're going to have to address. They need a couple of big bodies, and they need a solid tackler or two. Dorian Williams, Balen Spector, DeMar Hamlin, Taylor Rapp, who got knocked out of that game. It was just the angles weren't too poor, but they really weren't up for the task. And you could see, Henry, of course, on that first run, he hit 21 miles an hour, but he was pulled away from every DB they had. And that's not a good sign either for your team speed.
I agree. And, a lot of people don't ever really understand how much it slows you down to carry a football rather than running without one. It's actually not insignificant. And to have those three guys not be able to catch him. And I thought it was more like an even race for 50 yards. The difference in the 50 time, we'll say, from midfield, whereas about the chase began, probably was not more than 2 100ths of a second kind of thing. But that is a great credit to Henry because he's running with a football and he's 30. but that he doesn't get points for being old in terms of a simple sprint, but it was very impressive.
You know what my son said? It didn't look like they wanted to tackle him, Dad. And I said, you know what? I kind of thought that too. Yeah, if somebody would have dove at his ankles or something at the end, that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. They were. I think it was a few yards further back than that. They were quite close enough. But you know what? It was great to see the Ravens replicate the offensive identity they seem to find in that Cowboys game. And we're not happy with the way that game ended, That was really more of an issue with special teams and one drive of not being able to move the ball that allowed the Cowboys to be on the field for 24 out of 27 consecutive plays. But against the Bills, effectively, they otherwise repeated that offensive performance. A lot of total yards, 270 plus rushing yards, both games. They had their way pretty much. Lamar was effective. Henry was effective. The only thing I can point to in this game that kind of was a little bit of a disappointment was the fumbles. Having each of them fumble the ball once is not a good thing. And, one was a loss of the football, which certainly was concerning. And the other one could have cost him a touchdown. It didn't happen to because Patrick Ricard went into the pile like a guided missile.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. And that, Roger Rosengarten having a chance at it. And it was just so funny. At that point I could laugh because we got the touchdown, but I know that feeling on the sideline where you're happy for your team, but you're just so disappointed in yourself. You're offensive lineman. You had a chance to score a touchdown in your first primetime game and couldn't wrestle it away. But yeah, overall though, I think that the identity that was questioned in this kind of questioned by Ravens fans through the first two games has been established. It's kind of like a comforting. These were two comforting games. We finally getting our money's worth out of Derrick Henry. Lamar Jackson looks good. Ideally, this is the way we want to play. But, I would say my concern would be we haven't seen an even game script really from this team. Where
what it would be if the teams were in a very close game.
Very close game, and maybe the run just isn't working. They're more susceptible to the pass even. So not just the even game script, but a team that's more susceptible against the pass. Can we drop back? Can we throw it? Can we throw it 35 times and put up 35 points instead of the other way around? Not saying that we can't. I'm just saying that's the next step, because ultimately I believe Harbaugh, and I believe in my heart that it's the right way, that you have to be multiple. You have to be able to win games in different ways. Eventually there's going to be a game where your offensive line stinks, or the penalties go against you, or the other team hits you with an 87-yard play to open the game, and your defense is off to a slow start. You're going to have to sling that ball around, and it can't just be all Lamar like we saw in that Kansas City game playing Superman. We have to be able to distribute the ball and, on time in the passing game. So, ideally, I think, Ken, our identity is what we've seen, but you can't stick to that all the time. You have to be multiple, in my opinion.
First of all, completely agree in terms of you want to be able to beat teams in as many different ways as possible. And yet I look at the schedule coming up, and I'll say this. The Ravens play, and let's go to it right now, who they play for the next 6 weeks.
Bookend with the Bengals. So you have the Bengals now and the Bengals 6 weeks from now.
So you got the Bengals and you got the Commanders. And the Commanders have for all of Jaden Daniels' success, have not been very good defensively. So they've got real problems from that perspective as well. Tampa Bay is after that. Now it's not an unchallenging game, but I wouldn't call that a real first class game either. It got Cleveland after the week after that, and they've got multiple problems. I guess I'd probably have to start with their defense really hasn't looked that good relative to who they're supposed to be. Then they've got Denver, a team that beat the Jets in a big upset, but has major quarterback problems. And then you've got Cincinnati again. With our friend Joe Burrow, who the Ravens have had significant success again in recent years. Since he threw for 525 against them, and I think the Ravens have been extremely successful against them. They've been in the McDonald too high shell. Now we'll call it the Orr too high shell, and that's really frustrated the hell out of Burrow the last couple of years.
I feel like we've handled better Bengals teams than what I've seen from Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. I mean, I watched the first game intently. The New England game was on here on TV, and it was a mismatch on the lines of scrimmage. And that's the kind of game you don't want to play the Ravens in those kind of games if you're weak up front on both sides of the ball. So even in those games, though, Ken, where the Ravens painted out a favorable schedule, favorable matchups, there may be a game early on where the running game is stuffed, or maybe this team just commits extra resources to the box. They're having a good day. They're calling run blitzes. They're blitzing off the edge, that kind of thing. And we're going to need to throw the ball. So I think it's going to pop up even though, the schedule is a little lighter. Ideally, we get ahead and we see in the third and fourth quarter what we've seen throughout the last two games, which is just a battering rush attack.
Right. And look, I'm fine with whatever way they figure out to win. And I'm happy if they prove they can win multiple ways. I do think there's reasons why, and we'll get to this with the wide receivers, why you really do need to figure out how to weave them into the offense so they don't become a highly disgruntled lot. In part, just because at the least, I would not want it to affect their run blocking. I don't want to have Bateman all of a sudden, giving up on run blocks because he's not happy about his target share kind of thing. But anyway, the looking ahead to 6 games, I was in at the radio station, and one of the 3 morning people is not of the opinion that the Ravens can win by this formula very often. And he actually said it after the Dallas game. And then, of course, they won by it almost identically in this last game against Buffalo, except much more convincingly. So you beat a middle of the road team in Dallas, fair to say. They're not the bottom end of the league by any stretch, but they're not also the top end of the league. They've got a good quarterback, and they've got some pieces, that may keep them on the fringe of the playoff race, whether they get in or not. They're middle of the road. And then they beat Buffalo, who clearly is still an AFC contender, whether or not, that you think they end up ultimately being able to challenge the Chiefs and the Ravens, who I believe, and maybe the Texans being the other.
I like the Texans myself. I do. I think it's Buffalo, Kansas City, and Houston, and then we're gonna have to beat Pittsburgh. That's a team I really have the bullseye on, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Like as much as we've matched up well and done well against Cincinnati, it's the opposite for Pittsburgh. I need to see Lamar have a great game against them. I really want to smack them down, and I don't know. It's kind of personal at this point. Like we take care of Pittsburgh. This division is ours. If we blow 2 games against them again, that'll be a problem. But yeah, I didn't mean to take away from your point. Go ahead, Ken.
I think if they split the games with Pittsburgh, they're going to be fine. And obviously some of that has to do with how they play against Cleveland and against Cincinnati. But I would find it very difficult to believe that Pittsburgh is going to go on the kind of they've been through a lot of the easy part of their schedule. And I don't think that they're the kind of team that's going to rack up 12 wins, say, and really force the Ravens to have an exceptional run to get it done. And, even if they did do something like that, they'd really have to destroy the division teams, which I suppose is possible. But if the Ravens go 1-1 against them, then they're not on any worse footing in terms of having the tiebreaker, I wouldn't think. So we'll see how that plays out. We really will. Point being, 6 games in a row coming up right now, where I think the Ravens can do some similar things formulaically. I in a lot of ways, while I do want them to find multiple ways to win, I don't feel like there's any reason for all that to be on tape. I think, let's figure it out. Go to the lab and figure it out. Bring it up at a game. Nah, don't hurry. Don't be in a hurry to do that.
Sure. Absolutely. And I'm with you. You just win any way you can. I think the easy way to win is not putting the ball at risk. And that's what we've been doing, clean up the penalties, which we'll get to. And you're going to be in good shape. I think most teams, I think Dallas's run defense was flat out just bad, undisciplined. And I do think Buffalo was light. So those 2 teams, yes, they're good teams, but their run defense is an Achilles heel for both of them, I would say. So there will be more challenging matchups for the Ravens run game in the next 6, even if the teams aren't as good. So I think it'll be a good test. But yeah, I'm with you. We don't need to empty out the playbook on in the pass game. It's nice to have right now, basically for the last 2 games, teams don't have anything to study in the pass game. It's all cherry.
You've probably seen in terms of DVOA that Aaron Schatz put out there that the Ravens are the 2nd or 3rd greatest team, the 2-2 team ever in the DVOA era.
Yes.
So I forget if they're actually 2nd or 3rd, but the interesting, the entire list doesn't contain a single Super Bowl champion, but there's a whole bunch of playoff teams. The 2-2 teams who were at the top of the DVOA list, almost 100% of the time, maybe 2 or 3 misses in the group, had gone on to make the playoffs. So at least that part, I think the 0-2, there's only a 9% chance you can make the playoffs crapola. We're by that. In my mind, even if they lose the game to Cincinnati, it certainly is possible in Cincinnati that can happen. They're only about a 2.5 or 3 point favorite. I don't think there's really a big risk that the Ravens won't make the playoffs from that point, from 2-3.
Yeah. Hey, we'll see what the DVOA looks like after 4-2. and maybe we'll see maybe we'll see some Super Bowl teams on that list with us.
All right, sounds good. They're still the betting favorites to win the AFC North at 55.6%. I've seen other similar numbers thrown out there by various ESPN indicators and such, but that's the gambling public is saying they have about a 5-9 chance to win the AFC. They were the AFC North favorite at 0-2 still, even with the Steelers at 2-0. So that was, I thought, pretty interesting and pretty telling. You mentioned the penalties early. They got beat by another 41 yards of net penalties in this game. This is not a game where I would point to that they got screwed on a bunch of calls. I don't think that was a problem at all. I think this was a problem of not having enough discipline. In some ways, probably not having enough experience on the offensive line to avoid some of these stupid penalties.
That's what I saw too. I didn't think the officiating crew was over officious.
Mm-hmm. Over officious jerks.
Who said that?
Marv Levy.
Yes, that's right. That's what I don't think this crew was power happy, over officious. I think that we deserve those penalties that came our way. And you said the offensive line. That's where I'm most concerned. Like I can live with a grabby penalty, a 50-50 pass interference now and then. Those are costly and crucial, and you want to coach them and avoid them, but they're unavoidable. You have to play tough defense. But the pre-snap penalties and the holding penalties when there's no need to hold just really are the ones that drive me crazy.
Right. And Marlon had a stupid personal foul, but so did 94 Smoot for them.
Yes.
He had 1, 2. Again, if they could just stay equal on the stupid personal fouls, I'm probably okay with that. Part of the Ravens on the personal fouls period, let's say that, because I think part of the Ravens DNA is to really body slam the quarterback when they get the opportunity. So you don't want to have them, with a high pressure defense creating a lot of quarterback hits relative to what Jackson takes. You don't want to have them called for more roughing the passer calls than the other team. And it's good if you're even.
And you know what? On that point, there were. I mean, Josh Allen got the snot kicked out of him.
Oh yeah,
there were probably like 4 or 5. Now I'm just thinking about it, where if the officials were a little bit power happy, letter of the law, they may have been able to call at least one of those. I mean, maybe 2 or 3. Him sliding, him getting hit after he released it. There was a few of them. The Roquan came diving into one time. I'm like, he touched him. But so yeah, we look. Hey, I think a lot of this will work itself out, but it's the offensive line that needs to be disciplined. This young group, this new group, we really need to see some good plays. And a lot of times you're committing holding fouls because you're getting beat.
The other one that's also very serious is IDP. It's only a 5-yard penalty to be illegally downfield, but it carries the weight of the option for the defense, which is very significant. Mm-hmm. And the one on Faalele was declined because there was a 2-yard loss. Well, it demonstrates pretty clearly why it's worse than a false start, which is just 5 yards, no matter whether you like it or not, as opposed to choice between -2 and loss of down and -5.
And another reason we have to get the illegal man downfield cleaned up is because the screen game is a part of our offense now, and it looks really good. That penalty, that kind of penalty can wipe out a 25-yard first down in 3rd and 15 or something, so yeah.
By the way, if you're looking for differences that the Ravens had in their pass game, let's put a pin in that, but I want to come back to the screen game and what was decidedly different, because I noticed one thing in watching, and there's great downfield blocking and whatnot, but there's something else that the Ravens have done schematically to improve their screen game. Okay, but we'll get back to that in a little bit. 2-1 advantage in first down by penalties to the Ravens. It's nice anytime that happens. The 3 of the 6 offensive fouls were drive stallers. And I kind of struggle with the definition of drive stallers because I think there was a penalty by Rosengarten immediately before the fumble by Jackson. So I think technically if they don't get a first down after the penalty, then it's a drive staller. But I don't know if you'd really blame it that way.
Right. Yeah.
I thought, one of the things we saw in this game that kind of an overarching thing was just unbelievably good skill position blocking in the game.
Oh, absolutely. And I think my favorite one was Bateman's block downfield, just holding position near the front of the pylon on Lamar's touchdown run. Just an excellent job. And, for years it was, I credited some of that to Greg Roman, and having unselfish players who needed to block to stay on the field, like Miles Boykin. Willie Snead was a good one. Of course, you had Nick Boyle out there. But this is a more multiple offense. Todd Monken's not necessarily known for leading the league and rushing like Greg Roman. So to have that kind of buy-in by your receivers and belief that this play could go and my block could mean the difference while you're in the end zone by Bateman in that example was excellent. Kolar, likely, even Zay Flowers, and they're not asking him to do too much, and come down, crack block when somebody is not looking. It's just been a really, really pleasant surprise. Tylan Wallace gets his share in the game. He's not being targeted, but I like the look where they have Ricard out there, Kolar out there, Tylan Wallace is a receiver, and everything points to a run, but then they'll have Justice Hill back there. So it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And they'll find a way to get Justice Hill in space and utilize their best blockers that they have on the team. So it's been really exciting. Like this was a Todd Monken game to me, really the last 2 weeks, but this week in particular, I thought that he did an excellent job throughout the game.
Yeah, I agree with you, by the way. I think that's a really good point. It's one of the ones that we need to take the time to really credit the coaches when they're doing the right thing. Harbaugh had some fine things in this game. He got them ready to play for a night game the way he always does, and they beat the schnot out of a really good Bills team, or out of we'll call it a good Bills team. What was supposed to be a great Bills team. We could even say it that way. But that was, it's something he's been consistently able to do. And if you're missing out on the value of Harbaugh, that might be one of the places you're missing it. If you hate Harbaugh, just beyond all things, Republicans and Democrats in this country can't talk to each other at all. There's literally no common ground because there's so much vitriol and whatnot. But it's kind of like the hate Harbaugh crowd and the not hate Harbaugh crowd. Look, you got to be able to build yourself a pros and cons list about it too. Just point to the things that are really wrong. Try and convert that to a thing. And I think if you come out of this game, a lot of people are going to say, well, look at the double timeout Harbaugh called, and that's the biggest mistake. Well, first of all, he owned it. That's worth 0.0001 points back in his favor. Almost nothing. He made the mistake. But second of all, look at the value of the thing. It's at one conversion of a first down versus the ability to get your team ready to play at an odd time on a Sunday night. And the other team is obviously not doing whatever they need to do to get their players ready to play at that time. And it's not just a matter of skill. There was something else about the readiness of the Ravens for this game that was just distinctly different.
From the very first play on offense. And you know what? It was nice. An aside to this is that whenever we defer or, get the ball first, or the other team gets the ball first and we get a 3 and out, or excuse me, even if it's not a 3 and out, the other team doesn't score. We get the ball in a relatively good position, not in back at the 1 or anything. But that to me, we got the ball, no score, and you get the ball in the second half. That's that is a great sign to me. It's almost like you get an extra possession at that point. You won the extra possession.
Yeah.
You're getting one more in this game than they are. So getting that opening defensive stop was really nice. That speaks to them coming out ready to play as well.
Yeah. And then they gave it away in the second half, which was unfortunate.
Right.
That is the way it goes. Let's move on a little bit. The snap battle, really low snap count game, which was very fortunate because, of course, they went again with 4 defensive linemen. This time it was more out of necessity than choice, but they did have a choice to elevate, say, a Chris Wormley and have a 5th defensive lineman active. They decided not to. And it was interesting the way they paired up their linemen during the game because it was a little more snaps for Washington and Urban. They were almost always on the field together. Whereas Madubuike and Jones were almost always on the field together, and they were a wrecking ball.
They were. The 4 defensive lineman thing, I from what I've seen, that frustrates you. It really frustrates me too. And the disappointing part to me is in the preseason, our backup guys were getting pushed around like nobody's business. So excuse me. So when Pierce is out, that really only leaves Travis Jones as that nose tackle in the middle. And I saw people say, well, Brent Urban's up this game. It's the same. Well, Brent Urban is a defensive end. He's more of a defensive end than he is a nose tackle for sure. You can't expect him to take double teams in the middle from the center and the guard and hold his ground.
Right.
Like we really could use on the practice squad, in my opinion, Ken. Not literally this guy, but the Jelly Ellis, the Domaka Peko, the other 350-pound guy who can, just hold up and take on a double team, because I really want Travis to not only stay fresh, but if this happens again, we need another Michael Pierce type on this team. Right. Is what I'm getting at.
And first of all, asking for another Michael Pierce type, that's a really tough ask, because those are hard to find. But they had guys, Sanat and Tupou, who were both, I think, released with injury settlements at the end of camp. They both got hurt, I believe, in the final game or games, and were let go. They might have been put on injured reserve, as the roster was decided, and then released with injury settlements shortly thereafter. But that they're both gone. Those guys, either one of them would have been okay to have as a backup nose tackle. Broderick Washington's a little too light in the loafers for it.
He's probably the next best, though. And that's all we have. That's all we have, right?
Yeah, and when they go out there with Urban, he's in there at 1-0. Or 2-I or whatever it might be to go look at that. Urban is a 3-5 guy only. I mean, he's really not a guy you want over the nose. You can have him there on an obvious passing situation, because you can have a lot of people there.
Sure.
On obvious, you could have an outside linebacker there on an obvious passing situation.
That could have been a real problem if we were down in this game and the Bills were running it.
Yep. And they stopped the run effectively. And one of the things we got to get back to the offense here. We talked about the run actually on the show. Really love the fact that they didn't allow a run over 8 yards in the game. That was, with only 4 defensive linemen, that was quite an accomplishment.
Well, hey, if you want to talk about, we had only 8 offensive linemen active for this game too.
That's normal, right? 8.
Yeah. So, that too, it's just like, and I see in your notes here, with extra special teams players, both teams still gave touchbacks on a combined 9-9 kickoffs.
That's the thing that just tightens my colon. You might as well wind it around a fishing reel.
So Kedar Holdman, refresh my memory here.
Not active.
Who do we have? Who
they activated a third running back, was the only guy they activated this week. So it was Collier.
Well, I don't mind Collier. I don't mind Collier because I think you need a third running back. Ideally, you want a third running back.
Right.
Especially in a game like this, I would have gave him carries, but
well, then Kane or Braid could have sat. I think Braid was not active. It would have had to been Kane who would have sat for the game. They had other guys. I'll look at my defensive roster here, because it's almost always extra defenders they carried, and they brought TJ Tampa was the 4th corner, so they needed to have him.
Isaac was active, right?
Yeah. They had 6 outside linebackers active, so they certainly could have said no on that. I think those are the 2 primary choices. They could have. You really want to take a chance? Actually, it doesn't help. It doesn't help you to go with 7 offensive linemen, because you get the bonus roster spot for having the 8th offensive lineman. But right. Salah was not of any use to them, other than another
emergency
body. Yeah,
right.
All right, but you hit on exactly the thing that is that just if you're not going to play special teams, you don't need a whole bunch of special teams players. And I still question how a player like Brent Urban might be able to cover a kick under the current rules. I mean, it's a lot of 2-gapping in the middle of the field. Yes, speed is useful to chase down players who have gotten through the middle, but Brent Urban's going to be very effective at holding a guy off one-on-one and then denying space to one side of himself. So you can almost post up around that on special teams in some ways if you're really directionally kicking, or even if you kick to the middle of the field and you force them to one side. I'm not buying into the whole you need extra special teams players.
Yep, I let that be known. My thoughts on that as well on Twitter. I just don't see it. The 4D lineman, I know it's an offensive show, but the 4D lineman is what really bothers me, because we need Matabike and we need Jones for this whole season. Mm-hmm. We need him fresh.
Yep, absolutely. Derrick Henry, let's talk about him a little bit. Obviously, he was very dominant for almost the entire game. Obviously, the fumble was not a good thing, and he did help the team close out the game after. He had a couple of slower drives in there, but I thought right around that missed field goal for Buffalo that really ended the game he had two good drives that removed any doubt before it, and one before and one after. The one before that put him up 28-10 again and gave the Ravens a little breathing room, and then the one after that put it out of range at 35-10.
I am really enjoying watching Derrick Henry, and I think it's for different reasons than most people who don't really dig into the film and that kind of thing. And it's because he has a pace, a vision, a patience about him that the Ravens haven't had at running back, and JK had it. But Derrick's even better than JK, and of course JK was barely available for the Ravens. But, last year when we had Gus and we had Justice, two completely different kinds of runners, they almost had their own set of plays. Gus is going to be between the tackles, usually between, he's only going B gap or A gap. And Justice is, you're going to hit him with the change of pace outside. Derrick Henry, inside runs, outside runs, zones, traps. You mentioned it, counters. It doesn't matter. He is making his blockers better. You just see the pace of his runs where it's not too slow, not too patient, not too fast. He's not running his guys out of blocks. He's really allowing them to get there. And it's just a joy for me to watch the science, him just diagnose these runs. And, I remember coming out of college, Ken, he had, I think it was 600 carries at Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about 600 carries at Alabama, however many carries he's already had in the NFL at 30 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, this man has run every single running play, hundreds of times, baby. And that might not even be an exaggeration. And it shows. He's just a pro. He is just a pro.
What the guy I'd compare him to in baseball, and this is part of the reason why there are exceptions to rules. One of my rules is never sign a 30-year-old running back. Another of my rules would be never pay a whole bunch of money at the running back position. But the guy in baseball he kind of reminds me of is Nolan Ryan, who's just such an exception to the age rules. Phil Niekro, if you were around in the 1980s, is a guy who could still be effective, almost pushing 50 years old and still a good pitcher. But Ryan was similar. And Ryan is probably more the type of player I'm talking about, because if 30 for a running back is probably like,
44,
38 for a pitcher.
Yeah, and Nolan Ryan pitched to 44 years old, maybe?
I think he was older than that. I think he retired in 93, and it was his 27 years. I want to say it was basically about 47 when he retired. But and man, I could be off by a year.
To your point, though, Henry is an outlier. He's different in the speed and the power and all that. Yeah, it's amazing. And just think, he was out there for $6-7 million, and nobody really made a play for him. I mean, I think he wanted to be here anyway, but it's just amazing to me. Like, this is why I've been so concentrating and on the offensive line and so critical of it in some ways, is because last year I felt like we had the mobility up and down, and for all John Simpson's struggles with the penalties and pass protection, that man kicked butt in the run game, and he could pull and he could do all that stuff. So last year, Zeitler, Moses, they could all move. They were all just, could execute any kind of block, but we had backs that couldn't execute every kind of run. They were in there. Now we have Derrick Henry. I want a line to be able to, execute different things. And I think Monken's done a good job of finding what works for Henry in this line and allowing them to build some chemistry together.
Well, they're doing it cheap. And it's how they need to do it at some position. So if you make the offensive line right, then some other place on the team is not going to be right, because they're going to have to underspend there. So it had to be done somewhere, and it hasn't been perfect, certainly, but these last two games are a big step in the right direction. We'll get the offensive line scoring in the second show, by the way. This was a game where there was some funkiness to the offensive line scoring. Some of it was penalties, some of it was a slippery field, some of it was more demanding blocks, but we'll get into some of that a little later. I want to do that. Let's talk about Lamar a little bit and what's going on with him, because he did not take over the game as a scrambler. Only had one scramble for 9 yards, from the pocket, which is fine when you're only getting sacked once. Actually, you really got sacked twice if you want to include the intentional grounding call.
Yes.
So this would have been a kind of a negative game from the perspective of him as a scrambler relative to his sacks. But they only threw the ball 19 times, 20 if you include the sack here, and he outperformed his opportunity set again. which I think has been often the bent with Lamar in low utilization passing games. So when Lamar throws the ball 20 to 26 times, probably has a much better record. And I'm shooting from the hip here a little bit than he does in terms of beating his expectation than he does in games where he throws a whole lot, where I think there tend to be a lot of shorter get first downs out of necessity passes that tend to not be as explosive as they can be in games with low utilization.
And I'm going to go, double down with you on this and just say that I think that that's the case for most quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Lower volume means you're winning, means the passes are safer. And there are some offenses, obviously, like if you go back to the Brady offenses, which everybody can relate to, they were very much a ball control, dink and dunk type of Edelman and James White out the backfield. And that was the way that they ran the ball. So you'll have outliers like that too. But, the more you can run the ball, the more you shorten the game. If your quarterback has, less than 30 attempts, I bet they have better records.
For sure.
Quarterback throw more than 30 times because you're down. So, from Lamar, I was disappointed in the fumble a lot because, the game was the game was on the verge of being put away. Mm-hmm. Those are the times where you can't make a mistake. And we saw one the week before, Ken. Now the play eludes me, but it's like the one thing you can't do here. We got them by the whats. Do not give the ball away.
Right.
And then the intentional grounding wasn't good either. It seemed like it didn't instill confidence. It was like it was a panic type play, and it's just like settle down, guys.
It was a little bit of a panicky play. Honestly, I think there was the difference between S-14 and a penalty for 14 yards. I think that was the only actual difference. And in the offensive line scoring I did, it actually was a free runner. It didn't have anything to do with the offensive line in terms of that sack. But it was the kind of play that you look at, and it's a Lamar one-on-one play. It's a possibility of beating the guy, first of all, when you're in that situation. But second of all, obviously it was thrown too close to directly backward for me to be comfortable with it. Imagine if that ball had stayed on the field, somebody picked it up,
Yeah. And then again, I knew it didn't make a difference, but it just set this panicky type tone to a stadium that was starting to feel it at that time. Yeah. Other than that, though, I thought Lamar played great and did exactly what he had to do. Dropping the bucket.
Attention sports fans, do you love winning? Of course you do. That's why you need to check out Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million members. And it's super easy. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 players, stat projections, sit back and watch the winnings roll in. How about a guaranteed win every week in September? Yep, just one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you a win each football weekend this month. That's 4 weeks of easy W's. But don't sleep on it. This deal vanishes when September ends. But wait, there's more. Worried about injuries ruining your lineup? Relax. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. If your player leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, your lineup stays in play. No more stressing over those unexpected injuries. This weekend, I'm taking Derrick Henry for more than 70 yards and Daniel Jones for less than 193 passing yards. 2 picks that I feel great about. And the best part is you can win up to 100 times your money with just 4 correct picks. So what are you waiting for? Download the Prize Pick app today and use the code RAVENS to get $50 instantly when you play just $5. That's right, $50 free just for giving it a shot. More winning, less stressing. Prize Picks is where the fun begins.
Get to Zay Flowers on the sideline. I thought was an excellent throw, a nice in between level 1 and level 2 I think that was likely early in the game, right, Ken?
Yeah, the 26 yarder. Yep.
Looked like his third read, a bullet coming back to Bateman on the right side of the field. That was a nice throw. So he didn't throw much, and of course, you had your short ones and screen game and everything, but some really accurate darts there. The Bateman throw. And the
wheel route to Hill too. I mean, that was
perfect, right? Yeah. So, the great example there is great examples rather of Lamar. He was on his game, and I think it was the kind of night where if Lamar had to throw 35 times, the Ravens would have been in good shape. It just, he was on. Sometimes you got your good fastball, sometimes you don't. It looked like Lamar had a really good feel for the ball coming out of his hands.
Yeah, it wasn't a low ADOT game. The Dallas game was extraordinarily low ADOT. And despite all the screens in this game, it wasn't really a low ADOT. He threw the ball over the defense several times. One to Likely, the Hill one, Bateman you mentioned. And he had some drops. He was a little bit victimized by his receivers in terms of Flowers not hauling in a ball he could have had maybe. Aguilar, I thought, actually saved him an interception more than he missed the ball. He went up with one hand, couldn't
maybe that one was, yeah, I could see, I can see both sides of that.
Okay.
Because he did kind of drop it in the bucket, but it was a nice play by Aguilar. If it goes off his fingertips even.
Yeah, that's danger. Yeah.
So yeah, and getting back to the Lamar wear and tear, my number one concern by far after that Kansas City game is we're not going to be able to function unless Lamar's Superman, and Lamar's not going to make it through this season fresh. I'm not going to say he's going to get injured because of it, but he's going to be worn down in December carrying the team on his back. The more games we can have like this, Ken, even if it's just a half of football or the fourth quarter and half of the third quarter of just pounding the other team with the run game and not having to use Lamar as part of the run game. That's beautiful. That's what this team needs, a fresh Lamar going into December and January.
I'm with you entirely. Real quick on the ATS BOQ pressure, he had 7 ATS opportunities. I mentioned that's 35%. That's pretty good for the offensive line, by the way, to provide 7 out of 20 ATS opportunities. He completed 4 out of 7 for 80 yards, 11.4 yards per play. That's really good. Then he had 6 ball out quicks, which is kind of low for 20 times, only 30% BOQs. He went 6 of 6 of those for 51 yards. That's very good at 8.5 yards per play. Then I have to toss in the 7 pressures, and included in that is an intentional grounding as just an incomplete pass. It really should be another minus 14 on there. All that meant would have 6 plays for 11 yards. It would have been just about 2 yards, a little under 2 yards per play, which is a little worse than average, but he still would have been about 22 yards better than his opportunity set. One thing we didn't see in this game was Lamar run the offensive line out of any pressures at all. And by comparison, he had 7 against Kansas City that he ran them out of. It was constantly, he was saving offensive line. He had 1 against Dallas, which again, a low volume game. So I'm not expecting it at the same degree, but 0 in this game. And, is that a bad thing? It's not a good thing, but it probably also is not, unreasonable that these kind of games are going to come in once in a while, that he just doesn't have an opportunity to bail out the offensive line.
I mean, I think that part of it too was that the protection was so good for stretches, and I think the game plan to protect when we had extra blockers in there, what the assignments were, the shifting of protection, sliding from left to right. The command that Lamar had at the line of scrimmage was generally really good. And when Buffalo got him, they got him good. It was a nice chess match up there up front that the Ravens were in control of. Again, credit to Monken, credit to Lamar for really running that thing. But yeah, he really didn't have to run himself out of trouble too much, in this game. So I think that I don't know what I'm trying to follow right there, but he didn't run out of trouble a lot, but I didn't think he
didn't have one. Yeah. Well, he had 7 pressures. So did he have to? He passed out of some. When he had pressures, he got sacked once where he didn't make it back to the line of scrimmage. If he had, he would have gotten a run out of pressure on that one. So there were instances. It's just there weren't none, but he was generally pretty good at getting rid of the football somewhere.
Gotcha. Thank you, Ken.
The next gen stats were a little more favorable to him. A 2.85 time to throw, which was right in the middle of the pack, by the way. I think that's an area where you can look at and say it'd be nice if Lamar could win under different time to throw parameters. So yeah, it's when I see him have 3.2, 3.5 seconds to throw. First of all, I know there probably is one great play in there he made with about 8 seconds of time.
Yes,
that bumped the whole thing up. So you got that as a good starting point.
No, that's great. And part of me wonders how the pistol making a comeback, the under center, I've cut up on my channel of all the under center runs that we basically used it a lot to run out the clock. So it's, I put the score at the bottom so fans could get the context of when we were running under center. But there were also some nice play action throws in there. I think the one to Likely early in the game was from under center. But I wonder how mixing it up, because when I went back and was counting, and I just did a loose count, I think it was like 6 or 7 plays in which I would consider, like if they were under center, it would have been the old school 5-step drop or 7-step drop.
Mm-hmm.
Like an actual, like, hey, we need the line to hold up and block for this play to develop. I only counted 6 of them, say maybe 6 or 7. So again, because the game script was way out of whack, the Ravens were way ahead. There was no reason to take chances. I think that really helped the offensive line in this game. The throwing was unpredictable. They had to really brace themselves for the run. They had to load up the box, which I think made things easier on everybody.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's part and parcel to the having a low volume game is you when you do pass, it tends to be very effective in terms of what you do. 8 out of 7.5 in this game, so he's back to a more normal thing. Now, would you like that number to be a little higher? Sure, but that's in the middle of the pack in the league instead of being at the bottom where it was in that Dallas game with a
3 point something. It was 3.5, I think.
Something. Yeah,
yeah.
So fair amount of yak in his stats, about 91 yards of yak, but that's okay. That was the design of the passing plays largely, with a lot of those screens to Hill in particular, Henry also, and there obviously Henry and Hill I think had 9 of the total receptions that Lamar threw, 9 of the total targets he had on those passes. So there wasn't a lot of football to go around to anybody else.
It really wasn't, and I'm just loving the way that we're using the screen game. Did you want to talk about, or is that for the linemen?
No, we can talk about that right now.
I just, it seems like it's been something in general that we've wanted for a long time. And we always hear it in the preseason. Well, we're going to incorporate more screen pass. It never happens. Ronnie looks great there. Tyler is phenomenal on those kind of things. Even when you have Pat Ricard in the game, or Kolar, or Likely, those tight ends that are lining up on the wing, or maybe they're coming in motion. But Derrick Henry, doesn't have a lot of catches on his resume. He's not seen as a receiving back, but it's not because he has bad hands. It's usually because in Tennessee, he took such a workload on running the ball that their third down back was a pass catcher. So, between Hill and Henry, and really when you throw Keaton in there, if he can get 5 touches a game when he comes back, that's really how the Ravens can balance this thing out. And I think yak is where it's at in the league right now, Ken. When it comes draft time, I'm looking at guys who can catch a short pass and make somebody miss, because the days of just being able to air it out deep in this 2 high, 3 high shell type defenses is just gone. You need to be able to execute and make somebody miss. Find
the next Keaton Mitchell through that. The next Keaton Mitchell is obviously what everybody wants, because he's an undrafted guy. But there are a lot of smaller backs out there who don't get undrafted, who go undrafted for exactly that reason, that are terrific screen backs. You don't necessarily have to go up into the 2nd or 3rd round to get a running back. If you want to, if you really want to spend the draft capital, you can get an exceptional guy. You can get a J.K. Dobbins, who I think would have certainly been worth the draft capital had he stayed healthy.
Me too.
But then you were always taking that risk. The Ravens went cheap this time with Rasheen Ali, but they kind of bought in the mid range. I didn't like Ali, but he almost did not make this football team. If Owen Wright had not gotten hurt, I believe he just would have been cut. Owen Wright, obviously is cut and released on injury settlement, but he would have been a guy who I think was going to be cut. It did not look very good in camp at all, or in the preseason, obviously in the one game he played. So that, compounding.
So Ken, just I think this ties into your next bullet point here with the running back snaps.
Yeah. Can I go back to the screen pass thing though?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Because I didn't explain the secret sauce yet that I saw.
What do you have on that?
Here is the super secret sauce. They took all of the chip and set blocking responsibility away from Hill, and he'd been given an enormous amount of that in all the previous games. In fact, for all his whole career. But he had, in one of the games recently, I forget if it was game 2 or game 3, he had 10 set blocks and 5 chip blocks in one football game. Okay. Now he's on the field a lot, so it can happen. This game, 1 chip block the entire night. 1 chip block, no sets. Okay, so he was never. Henry was asked to set block. They used Ricard a lot, and they used other tight ends in that. They didn't ask Hill to do it other than one time. Okay, so now how did that manifest itself? Well, that gives Hill a much better chance to find himself in the right space as opposed to a specific space dictated by the pass rusher.
Right.
So if you chip, obviously set block, you're not going out at all. So that takes Hill completely out of any screen options. If you chip block, then you are limited in terms of your route choices, and you're limited in terms of where you can find space on the football field by the proximity to that pass rusher. So I think that's what it really was. I would be interested in your analysis of this in a big way. Look at the, you can look at the targets to Hill and just see how he reacted versus how in other games his targets have been when he started with a chip block.
What I've noticed on that is that he's able to make more difficult catches, and he's able to have just a split second more time to be able to make that first guy miss. So everything doesn't look as rushed. The linemen look rushed because, of course, they're screaming to get over there and just try to get in front of them. But the guy who's getting the ball looks more set because he has that extra, half second that it might take where he might get called up a little bit. It might be an awkward angle. It might,
sure.
It's sometimes it's a touchy situation because, you're supposed to chip, but maybe there's really not even a chip available. So you're trying to twist your way in there, and then maybe you get grabbed a little bit. So I think it helps Lamar, identify the target easier, and I think it helped, like you said, with Hill, become more quarterback friendly with it.
Yeah, so become more quarterback friendly with the space offered. But then there's another component to it too, that your linemen have a better idea of where they need to get to because it's related to the original spot on the field, the dance steps that they performed on Friday in their walkthroughs, as opposed to related to what that pass rusher does and what Hill is left to do under those circumstances. This is a type of play that is a see it play for Lamar, which we know he likes to see it plays as opposed to the throw the ball before the route is broken off. And that's his big mismatch with Bateman, is that Bateman's a great route runner. Biggest separation is coming right at the point of at the top of the stem, and Lamar is not able to make use of that like a lot of other quarterbacks would be, a lot of other pocket passers would be, because he's just not comfortable throwing the ball until he sees the break. And with Hill, that's not a problem on screen pass because he sees or senses a lot of that developing, and is still able to get to see it look. And your linemen know where it is. It's to me, overwhelmingly, that's what I saw this week out of the in terms of a difference.
That's great. I'm gonna have to, I didn't notice that Hill was not chipping on those. But yeah, it just looks pretty smooth. I'm glad to see us get our stuff together in that aspect of the game.
Let me go back and look at the one play where Hill did chip and if he got the football on that one.
Those are some big plays, by the way, while you're looking. I mean, they've really picked up some yards, some first down. What'd you got, Ken?
It was an incomplete pass, so it wasn't going to him because he caught all 6 balls. But he was a chip blocker on the third play of Q3 on 3rd and 20. That's his only chip block of the whole night. Any other of the plays, including all of the ones he caught, are open season for analysis of what I'm claiming here.
There you go.
All right. So anyway, we talked a little bit about that. So what do we want to go? You wanted to move us on to the snap division, right?
Yeah. I as it relates to, I had some people express concerns with Henry's workload, and I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, I think that they were kind of hell bent on getting him the 200 yards. I think there was some unnecessary action by Henry at the end of this game that, I understand. Look, and I like the fact that it looks to me like I've seen a different side of Derrick Henry this last week, just this past game. He's always so stoic, always so professional, always the same look on his face. I mean, we saw him, have something to say to Stanley in this game. We saw some real attitude from him in the end zone. The passionate speech, when he got the game ball. For such a stoic and professional guy, I think like him and Lamar are feeding off of each other. Is like, look, man, we're not getting any younger. Let's take this season seriously. But I think he also wanted that 200 yard mark. Where I would have liked to seen Collier get into game and take some of these crafts. I mean, we went from not using Henry enough to overusing them. So that's the way it's going to work week to week. And I would just like to see some balance. I would say even game script. Henry gets 20 to 25 touches. Hill gets 5 to 8. Keaton Mitchell, or a third back, gets about 5 touches. And that's how I would like to see it if we got, say 35 carries. So 20 to 25 from Henry, 5 to 8 from Hill, and then about 5 for Keaton. And all those numbers can move a little bit.
Right. Does that fuel the rushing machine as much as you want to? Is 35 carries enough? So if in a typical game you might have 35 carries and then I'd say 30 passes, because I think 65 is fairly normal.
Right. So, in even game script, you're going to have maybe a 2-minute drill in there. So that's kind of what I'm figuring, if I'm going to break down. But yeah, that's a way to keep everybody fresh, everybody involved, but to still play to your strengths is how I'm getting at. I don't think Keaton, you don't want to give him 10 carries, 10 touches a game. And I don't think you ever want to have a game where you get Justice up in the 15s. I think he's always been pretty much a 5 to 10 kind of guy. So, Henry's a big guy. He can handle the workload, but the other guys, like, I don't want to overwork them either.
I'm going to go back to the Nolan Ryan comparison for a second. And this has to do with the 200-yard games, because 200-yard games and no-hitters, you might put them in the same general level of rarity for these two groups. Maybe it's spurious slightly, but I'm gonna go with this analogy. So Ryan had 4 no-hitters by the time he was 29, or by the season where he was 29. Let me put it that way, because June 1st, 75, he did it at the Orioles for his 4th no-hitter, and that tied the all-time record with Koufax. Then he had to wait 6 years to get another one. So he's 35 years old when he got that one. We thought, okay, for sure that's the last one. Still has 2 left in the tank. When did he get them? Age 43 and 44. Yeah. 43 and 44. So I'm kind of feeling like the 200-yard game, it's not the last chance Henry's going to get. I think he'll probably, particularly with the way this team is focused and how good they are, I think there's a good chance he gets one over his remaining 30 or so games with the Ravens.
He might get one next week, looking at the Cincinnati defense.
I'll go with that. I'll sign up for that one. What else do we want to talk about here? They really did not play as, I'm sorry. In terms of, one of them is the workload in terms of snaps on the field, but Hill got the ball 10 out of 20 times he was on the field this week, that's a big uptick for him, and to go to 50%. Henry, 27 out of 37 is extremely high as well, but is in line with what we've seen with him being the kind of designated carrier when he's on there.
Gotcha. I like those stats. I'd like to see how similar it was last week, and then how similar it was, say, in week 1. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling week 1, the ball was spread around a little bit more, and those numbers were lower.
Let me the spread around idea. One of the things that I commented on at the game was what a fantastic set of scripted plays they came out with against the Bills. Now, I'm always pretty much going to say that when they score touchdowns on the first 3 drives. I think that's what it was.
Yes, it was.
But it was a very nice mix of a lot of things. They were able to. They had plays that could dig themselves out of a hole. They had ways to come back from penalties. They had ways to address various things. You don't have a lot of 3rd and 15 plays, and yet I think the Ravens still converted at least one 3rd and 14, right, during that season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was Hill as well. Yeah. It was just ridiculous yak. And, I love the game script. I think I mentioned it off the top. I topped out Todd Monking during the game. That was my tweet. Thought that was clever, trying to use the new lingo. But, the Ravens averaged 7.9 yards per play. Yeah, which is tremendous. And then a lot of people will say, oh, well, they had that 87-yard run to open the game. That's probably skewing everything. Well, if you take that one out, it's still 6.3 yards per play. I was
going to say it should drop by about 1.5 yards there, yeah.
But still, that's a good number, Ken. That's a good number.
No, happy with it.
Especially since we were running into a pile for 2 drives at the end there. So, if you really want to take out some plays, take out some of these, where everybody knew we were running, and, when Josh Johnson came into the game and that kind of thing. So just a really impressive performance by Monken. Zach were on the other side too in the offensive show, but I was glad to see Zach get in his groove as well.
I thought the last 2 weeks have been a major improvement for Zach. And this is about the time when McDonald started to figure it out after a really horrific game against the Dolphins in his 2nd game as coordinator.
Yeah. Scary comparisons, isn't it?
It's it'd be cool. Okay. Well, anyway, that's the workload we've kind of gone through. Let's talk about the heaviness. Now, it was a weird game for heaviness because they weren't super, super heavy like you might expect them to be in a game like this where they ran the ball very effectively. 1.96 heavies per play is actually down from 2.15 versus Dallas. Okay. Monken is still having a lot of trouble getting both of his two weapons on the field at the same time. And I don't have a list of total plays they played together, but Andrews played 46%, Likely played 54%. Together, that's 1.00. Okay. They were on the field some together. And so I'm not saying that they weren't. I'm just saying there were not a lot of occurrences of that. And
no, I understand. And, for this part, with all due respect, I hate to say the word game script again, but this is where I'm coming from. It's like, I think like Andrews and Likely would be on the field. They would be targeted more than 3 times combined if we weren't just kicking their butt all game. So
we've got a game though, where all 4 of the heavies were among the team's best run blockers. I'm talking, some of them were better than the linemen, frankly, in this game. But I mean, if you look at Ricard, might have been our best run blocker in the game. Likely has been forklifting people all over the field these last few weeks.
Fun to watch.
It is. It's so much fun. We didn't buy into this. That was what we thought we were getting. And my God, this is an outstanding additional prize at the bottom of the Jack.
I remember like our original evaluation, we were kind of on the same page with it. It was funny because I compared him. I was like, look, he's basically the same size as Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. You can't line the guy up in line and ask him to block the Jadeveon Clowney's was where I was on because Nick Boyle had some great battles with him. But we could use him as a move blocker and H-back. Mm-hmm. And remember, Ken, his first year, he could not hit a moving target as a H-back. And now look at him. He is like setting them up. And again, I think this has something to do with Henry as well and his letting these guys get to their spot instead of rushing to his spot. But he is forklifting is a great, forklifting guys. And it seems like once a game, twice a game. It's every game. It's just beautiful to watch.
High value, beautiful blocks in front of the play. And blocking in space has its own specific patience required.
Yes.
Watch Daniel Fa'alele try and block people in space. You get lunginess. You see, he's not able to really quite find the spot he needs to go to. The analogy of passing to or skating to where the puck's going to be, as opposed to it's some of that is true in terms of how you think about how you need to set up a block in space. Likely, he's Miles Boykin plus in terms of being able to go find the right spot on the field to be in. Boykin is often given the benefit of having somebody who's covering him that's easier to block. He's often coming off an inline, even out of the backfield, and he's figuring out how to set up a block in space. The timing of it is good. The dance steps to move up to the player is good, and the impact has been ridiculous these last couple of weeks.
He's got like a stiff arm. He's like working on with the stiff arm, man. It's just awesome to see from that first year where he really could. He looked lost as in space. And now he's hitting targets and doing what you're talking about with having a great feel for it overall. Boyle was my favorite blocker in space, of course, but Likely, man, that's big props to him. Big props to Kolar, if we're going to mention him, being able to combo blocks, the blocks in line, the kick out blocks, the seals, even some little reach blocks that he's pulling to be able to seal that edge. Charlie Kolar's come a long way in 2 years too, year and a half with this blocking. Yeah,
he has. He's distinctly and significantly improved from his first 2 years this year, and he's earned more playing time. I mean, he was at 19 snaps in this game. He's earned every bit of that, despite the quality of the guys in front of him. And he's been rewarded with a couple of really decent value targets. One of the things that you get out of Lamar running the boot, which he did for the 30-yard play to Kolar, is you definitely get the level 0 passing option, gets an almost immediate opportunity, which he can then usually turn into more yak. So Lamar, everybody's like literally like a Hellfire missile headed for him. They can think of nothing else but to try and constrain Lamar's naked boot and force that ball to be thrown. Well, that is very valuable, generally speaking, just more valuable to get the ball out of Lamar's hands. But it also, when you give it to a player like Kolar, who has some ability both to make people miss tackles, just with a little bit of agility, but more with power. He really showed up doing that in a 30-yard play.
And I believe it was a heavy formation this game with Hill, where it was some sort of boot. I don't think it was the same play that they ran in Dallas to Kolar. But again, Lamar had somebody right in his face. It was kind of a little sidearm toss to Justice Hill. Justice Hill's off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. That was a really good throw, I thought. Lamar getting it around the defensive player on, I think it was 2 different plays in this game. I was very impressed with.
He didn't have a chance to look to level 2. He didn't have a chance to look anywhere. It was Hill or bust, and he made it happen right on time with a creative delivery.
Yeah. All right. I think they had limited use of gadget plays, I thought, in this game. I'm not calling the screens gadget plays because I think that's kind of its own category. Are you concerned at all about the usage of Flowers in terms of not necessarily the volume of targets, but a higher percentage of his usage being near the line of scrimmage?
Yes, that's been a pet peeve of mine. I want to get Zay Flowers downfield more when we get him the ball. I whenever Zay goes into some kind of orbit motion, or even just a straight jet sweep type motion, I just don't like it. I'm already out on the play. Like, come on, man. I would at least want Zay to be able. He can threaten intermediate. He can threaten deep. You don't have to I think that Likely is a yak player. Hill is a yak player. We have other guys. Even Aguilar can make you miss if you come in at a bad angle and take it 10 yards. So I don't want to take away a weapon from Lamar downfield on the boundary. Bateman can get some. There's other guys we can get involved for these quick screens other than Flowers. Other guys we can put in motion, because I want to see Zay exploding off the line of scrimmage and threatening other parts of the field, and not just standing there at the line of scrimmage.
One of the issues that I think Monken is having right now is that it's hard to put another smaller pure gadget guy on the field with Flowers. And so, yes, Deontay Hardy can do some of the gadget plays that Flowers done. He's the guy who just hasn't gotten on the field at all. I mean, I'm very disappointed with his overall role on this team. I mean, I don't see the value at all if he's going to be used in the way he is as just a kick returner, using air quotes for that, he has returned a couple punts. I guess he said some value there, but he's got to get on the field if he's going to be really worth his game day activation.
Yeah, I mean, I think they expected more action on the kickoffs. This is where, and it's been 4 weeks, and I still think that they need a player like Hardy, and I think they still need cover. They think they still need cover guys, and the way the season's playing out, it's just going to be a bunch of kickoffs that start at the 30. If they really want to inspire more kick returns, 35. I'd say move that. Yes, sir. Yeah. Move to the 35. Then that all of a sudden that changes the equation.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that I think there's probably a 35% chance that will occur next year. That exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it just makes sense. The difference between giving the opponent the other ball at the 25 or the 30 is not worth the risk to the coaches, obviously. Mm-hmm. So taking another 5 yards, and then you'll probably start seeing some returns, and you'll probably start seeing the average field position at the 25 or 30.
Yeah.
In other words, guys are kicking off and guys are getting tackled around the 25, and the coaches are saving that extra 10 yards.
Yeah, it should be a little bit short of the 30 is what I would predict too if they
something like that.
Yeah. Jason, always a pleasure to talk football with you. We're going to come back, talk part 2. We're going to talk, look for that one episode next, if you will. We're going to talk extensively about the offensive line. We'll talk about some individual skill position players and their role in this game. But first of all, Jason, let's talk about what you have going on your channel.
Oh, sure. Add Huddle It Up Films on Twitter. Huddle It Up Films if you're listening here on YouTube. Been seeing your videos pop up more and more on my feed, which is great. Of course, I subscribe to Ken on YouTube as well. But over there, I'm actually, when we get finished here, working on a Kyle Van Noy cut up. I did a cut up of all of Lamar's usage under center. I didn't do the Josh Johnson. Every week now you're getting a few cut ups, and then on Thursday night this week, we're trying to keep it to Thursdays or Fridays. I'm working with Yuri and doing a weekly matchup shows. And Ken, we've been doing a really good job with the matchup shows.
I have to give that a listen.
Yeah, please do. And if you want to come on one week, go ahead.
Happy to.
He's kind of in a bad situation as far as like He's helped me out here. He's on location somewhere that's kind of secretive, but he's not home, and he's doing.
We're talking about Yuri. We're talking about or somebody.
Yeah,
else?
Yuri. We're talking about Yuri, and he's got a lot going on in that young man's life, and he has made time for me being on the West Coast to do this. But like last week, we called out Derrick Henry. We highlighted Balen Spector. We were talking about Khalil Shakir and how he could expose the middle. We're talking about Kyle Hamilton and the dime defense, and it's just really fun to dig deep with someone else who studies the draft and understands the players on the other team, not just from a statistical standpoint, but from a skill set. And it's really nice working with Yuri. He has a lot to say on social media. He's very funny, but in quote unquote real life, young man's got a great head on his shoulders. I'm very proud of him for what he's doing off the field and also helping me. So this Thursday, 9:15 on Huddle It Up Films, we'll be doing our preview show and slowly
get live show. And then
it's a live stream. The only problem we're having, Ken, is that we don't have a consistent day because of Yuri's busy schedule and him not knowing what his bosses are going to ask him to do. So one night it could be Friday, it could be a Thursday. Last week it was a Wednesday. This week, Thursday night, 9:15 Eastern.
Okay. All right. Very cool. And you're at Huddle It Up Films on Twitter. Make sure you follow Jason. He's a great follow, has a lot to say. And 95% of it's actually useful. So it's good to hear.
The other 5% is entertaining.
Orioles, yeah, right.
The other 5% is entertaining. Yeah. So there we go.
All right. Obviously, we're both really upset about this Orioles game tonight and the fact that they got exactly what they'd hoped for from Corbin Burns. They got a $25 million game tonight. I don't actually know what the total he's making this year, but it's not too much different from that. But they got whatever the value of his contract was. They basically got it tonight in a fantastic, well-pitched performance, and the Orioles still could not break their losing streak in the postseason.
It was sad because I felt like I don't know what it felt like in the stadium, but watching on TV, it was almost like the fans knew that this might be the last time we see this man, and he just pitched his ass off for us, and we're going to blow this damn thing again. And it was like that kind of send-off. Like, it was appreciative, but it just seemed like maybe it was just me feeling like that. But it seemed like if the stadium felt it too.
So some of the things that have plagued Burns throughout the year, honestly, were a problem tonight, including the stolen bases, not being able to hold runners on, and of course, gave up the big stolen base, had a tailor-made double play ball that came up right after that would have got him out of the inning. And then, for whatever reason, and I don't completely disagree with it, they felt the need to pitch to the best hitter the Royals have with 2 out and a runner on third.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations where I understand. I think it's probably on the margin of good baseball. It just sucks that you can't really be trying to pitch around him at the same time. So his pitch count was incredibly low at the time. So it wasn't a matter of, wasting some pitches. It was a matter of, let's figure out how to
and
get
not
past
only that,
Bobby Witt.
I would say people would say, well, he's an ace. You don't have an ace pitch around somebody, but that Royals lineup has Vinny Pasquantino, I think, is just coming back after months.
Yeah.
So
and if he's your superstar number 3 hitter, that's really not that impressive anyway.
You got an open base.
Okay.
You got two open bases. You got a man on third. It was just no reason to pitch to Bobby Witt there. It's one of those things to me in which is like, if it was Aaron Judge, do you think they would have walked him?
Yep.
Hell yeah. Well, Bobby Witt is the Royals' Aaron Judge.
He's the closest thing they have. It drops off a lot after him, and they certainly had an opportunity to not.
And then I think Burns finishes the 9th inning if they were obviously going to run. It was the same guy, Massey, or no, it was the same guy. It was the 9 hitter that stole a base earlier. Is the
Garcia.
guy who got on. So that was the only reason. Otherwise, we would have saw him pitch 9 scoreless, or 9 with 1 run. Excuse me.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I really hope the Orioles can come back from this, because going into the offseason with this is a little bit like what, the kind of millstone that has plagued Lamar throughout his career is being called a losing quarterback because you can't win in the playoffs, which is just so far from the truth.
And just think about how long that's hung around just because basically of one game. So like,
or maybe 4 games, but he's only lost 4 games in the playoffs lifetime. And he's got them buys. He's got them. Yeah.
My level of thinking is like his rookie year, we were just happy to be there. You know, it seemed like we were running the same 6 plays over and over again with Lamar. You know, the fact that we lost to the Chargers at home wasn't like okay, whatever. Nobody's talking about Lamar. It was that 2019 game with the number 1 seed that started it. And now, like with the Orioles, I feel like if they lose tomorrow, this is their 2019, because they will officially be, hey, this team hasn't won a playoff game in 2 years. You come up next year, this is going to be the talk. You know, it's going to be, hey, they haven't won a playoff game yet. They haven't won a playoff series yet. And it's funny when you mentioned Lamar, here we are 6 years later, and that's still the narrative on him. Like,
yeah,
it takes a while to shake. It takes a while to shake that, bro.
And the truth of the matter is, if the Orioles were to win it this year, this would be the Ravens 2012. It would be the weakest team of the general era winning a championship. And this Orioles team has stumbled to the finish line. I mean, they've been injured. Their whole starting rotation, even though honestly they've had pretty decent guys replacing. Well, you can't replace Kyle Bradish and Tyler Wells and the other Grayson. I mean, it's just
Bradish was the killer to me.
Yeah, they're all.
I don't know about you, but like that was the guy that I looked at as like at one Corbin's level closer to Corbin's level than anybody else's. Like,
we got a long wait to get him back. Yeah. Okay, got to call it here. But please listen in for part 2. We'll get back. We'll talk about the things we did. Other folks out there, if you wouldn't mind, tell your friends about this. Like and subscribe if you're listening to this on YouTube, or like and subscribe and go to YouTube and like and subscribe if you don't mind on that. Always nice to have a little bit of a subscriber base, have the engine drive some more traffic to this show. Even if you don't watch the videos yourself, liking and subscribing will help in that way. Jason, thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely, Ken. Thanks a lot, buddy.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.